Today, I have a real special treat for all of you. I'm speaking with Emmy-nominated director Richard Bazley, who has an incredible journey working as an animator on major Hollywood films such as Pocahontas, Hercules, and The Iron Giant, to transitioning to live-action filmmaking. With his unique background in animation, Richard has successfully navigated the indie filmmaking world, creating award-winning short films like Censure and Confines. In this interview, we'll dive into his creative process, the challenges of transitioning from animation to live action, the marketing and distribution strategies that he used for his indie films, and the business side of filmmaking overall. Here's my interview with Richard Bosley. Richard, you're somebody who I would consider to pretty much be a Hollywood legend at this point. I mean, you have worked on many films that kind of what I would consider shaped who eventually became as a filmmaker, right? Like you've worked on Pocahontas and Hercules and The Iron Giant, and all of these movies came out during a time when I really started taking an interest in filmmaking. So I would just love to learn more about, your background just overall in this industry.
And I'll go back even further. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was my first film, and it's a long story, but we've got an hour. So, yeah, I was a kid growing up in Devon, so Hollywood and all that stuff, filmmaking just seemed a distant thing, and I always had an interest in films, particularly at that stage in animation as a kid. This was back before videos or DVDs or online. And you had to wait years if Disney released a film before you could see it again at the cinema. One of the things I got most excited about at Christmas was actually every year they would play Jason and the Argonauts with the stop motion by Ray Harryhausen. And for me, it was the peak of Christmas to watch that and the skeleton fight, which he took 6 months by hand to create. So it was different at different times, but you really appreciated films when they came up and came on because you couldn't just find it online. Um, so there was all that. When I was about 10 years old, I got this book from my mum called Disney Films by Leonard Maltin, the film critic and historian, who I later met years later and told them about it. And have this book, and in the back there were black and white pictures of from the films, but also of Disney World down in Florida. And I said to my mum, "Can we go there?" And she said, "Well, you've got to be rich." And this is back in the days before cheap package flights to package deals to Miami. It didn't exist, so you literally did have to have a lot of money. So I didn't, in my wildest dreams, believe that within 15 years of that or a bit more, would have been there in LA, not Disney World, but Disneyland over there, having free passes, 6 guests I could take for free, discount on everything. I just wouldn't have believed it, but it's all small steps. You take steps in life, I've learned. You just take, those steps, and eventually you can get to those goals. So it was quite a remarkable, journey, and it's quite fun looking back and seeing, looking back, you think it's a smooth ride, it's anything in entertainment, it's a roller coaster. There's ups and downs and frequently more downs. But there are ups, so you've got to keep the key word to anyone watching is persistence. Talent is, of course, it's got to be a talent and ability, but you've got to work at it. I remember when I was at school, there was we had what we call O levels in art, and people progress at different speeds. And there was a guy who he was basically into science. He was going to be a scientist, but he could paint. Oh my God, he could paint. And he would do these paintings, mainly science fiction paintings, beautifully rendered and everything. And I thought, well, I can't do paint like that. And I was learning to paint and draw, and I was getting there. And he walked, got an A, and I got a B. And then I focused on it, and I was determined to get better. So when I got to A level, he'd actually dropped art because it wasn't his priority. Science was his thing. And I persisted and worked at it and worked at it, and I got an A for my art because that's where my heart was. That's what I wanted to do. So it shows. So I got the top grade. So it shows that, a lot of it is hard graft. You can have an ability, and people, yet there are different stages. You know, it's not a race, but if it was, it's a marathon. It's the end game. Um, so it's all stages. So there's a long journey. When I was young, I knew I wanted to go to art school, so I went to Exeter Art College, did a foundation course where you explore a lot of the different areas, and then I ended up doing a degree, ironically, in publicity, and graphic design in Liverpool. Um, because I remember you do like another foundation before you do your specialist subject, and you had all sorts of areas. There was an animation course, um, but they weren't into Disney or commercial stuff. It was very much fine art, which I liked, but the people from those courses went on to teach fine art. It wasn't jobs, other commercial jobs. Um, so I ended up working in advertising. So I did the publicity course, went to London, worked as a junior art director for a couple of years, and didn't like it. And suddenly found there was animation, or Disney was starting up in London to do Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So I went along with my portfolio, and they said, "Well, these are nice drawings, but we're looking for experienced animators." So I went away thinking, "Well, that's that." And then 6 months later, I went away and I bought a book by Preston Blair, um, which gives you all the fundamentals and basics of animation. And I had this coffee table with a glass table, and I put a light underneath, so I didn't have a proper table. I'm sitting here, you can't see it, by the way, from my actual desk from Roger Rabbit. I bought it. I don't use it much nowadays, but and so I did these exercises from Preston Blair book, and I went around to one of the animation studios, and they said, "Oh, I know someone who's a head up at Disney, and they've got." I didn't say anything. They said, "I'll fix you an appointment." So I didn't say anything that I'd already been. So I went up there again, but with some samples, and they looked at it and said, "Well, this is really good." And they saw the illustrations, and they said, "Well, that looks familiar." I didn't say anything. I said, "Well, we'll give you a test." So they gave me a test. They had hundreds and hundreds of people apply, probably thousands, and I did a test, and then they asked me to do evening classes for about 10 weeks, and out of the pool, a group of us, they've hired um, a couple of us. Now, although this was animation, this is my journey into filmmaking, which animation gives you a fantastic foundation for all types of film. From basically, you're an actor with a pencil. Um, so it gives you that all the grounding that you need, so you know how to work with actors, directors, storyboarding. Um, so it's a slower process, animation, but it's great tools. So there's some great directors that you'll know, like Brad Bird, who directed the Iron Giant. He went on to do Mission Impossible and Tomorrowland, and many other animators. Rob Minkoff, who did Lion King, and went on to do Forbidden Kingdom. And there's several others. Oh, Tim Burton. um, he was a Disney animator. In fact, on Fox and the Hound, he used to sleep under his desk because he was so bored or frustrated doing cute foxes, and they didn't know what to do with him. And at that time, Disney wouldn't have done dark stuff like Nightmare Before Christmas. So it was only until he left, did his thing, and they hired him back to do that film. On a and he took off. So I've been very lucky to have had that grounding, and have that start and that moment in Hollywood when I went there.
So you're in what I would consider a little bit of a unique position, right? Because you have worked on all these animated movies over the years, and then you decided that you were going to transition into more traditional live action filmmaking. So, what was the tipping point for you to make the transition into this type of filmmaking, and what were the challenges associated with that?
I can tell you, yeah, exactly. So after being at Disney at the peak, it's like being, we call it football, but a top soccer player for Chelsea or one of the top teams. In fact, there was only Disney and DreamWorks. So after being at the very top level and having achieved that, um, unfortunately, 2D classical animation died a death. Once Toy Story came out and CGI came in, and I'm not knocking CGI, it's a great medium. Um, um, and I did it for a while, did CG, but it didn't float my boat the same way. Um, and I've been in LA for 7 years. My wife also wanted to come back home to England, and we had to decide where to raise our children. So we chose to come back here near Bath. Um, so I did a lot of freelance storyboarding um, on TV series, which I could do remotely. And I did go back to LA for about 20 years, back and forth. And I did get to direct Lost Treasure Hunt, a TV pilot, which we got 2 Emmy nominations for. So I'm very proud of that. But most of the time back here, it was just small kids' TV series. And the problem with that is it's not there's not a lot of you in that product. You do it, it's a job, and you carry out a function, and you put it together professionally. But there's not the passion, say, for Horrid Henry or Thomas the Tank that I would have for my own films. You just do it, you get paid. Um, and I was getting frustrated with that. So luckily enough, about over 10 years ago, I was lucky enough to have earned enough to have paid the mortgage and have a choice. Now I could have carried on and doing that, but it as an artist, you've got to satisfy your soul. You've got to kind of, or some have to. And I had all these ideas, and I'd had a number of projects fall through. And I'd also, this is a huge thing, I was lucky enough to set up for a period when I was back here with Gary Kurtz, who produced Star Wars, Dark Crystal, Return to Oz. So, and he had an interest he worked with Disney on some animated projects too. So we had a lot in common. We formed a production company, and we created some big films, some concepts of big films, The Chimeran, which is sort of cross between Planet Apes and District 9. And it's still there, it's kicking around. But that and some other projects, they're big, they take lots of money. And Gary passed away a few years ago. So I've been chasing my own goals and projects and created smaller films, which I call baby steps, to get to a bigger picture. But I've been enjoying the process so much, I could carry on making short films, but we are leading up to features again. So I said to a DOP friend of mine, "Oh, let's just go out and make a film. We don't have much money, but you've got the equipment, you've got the skill." He does, John Fry does mainly, has been doing many corporate work, which is bread and butter work, but he's done some great film work as well. So I said, let's just go and make something. So I also spoke to Neil Basson, who's a writer, a good friend of mine now, and we've been developing some future projects. So I said, let's just get a short done, just go out and do it, film it. And I'd also got the interest of Tom Conti, a great British director, actor, fabulous actor. So I asked Tom, I said, would you be interested in this idea? And he said, yes, I'd gladly do it for you. It was a voice off screen, which is part of the concept of Censure. So I pulled all these people together. I'd also seen, I'd been attached to a feature, a horror film in Ireland that didn't happen, but I saw a great audition by an actor called Conor Wolfred. So I had him in mind for this role, this character. And the idea for Censure came about during lockdown. And I wanted to find a way to make a film, but get around all the restrictions that we had at that time. It was really hard to make a film. So I had this character who's basically on screen most of the time with all these voices off screen, and built the idea around that. Now, once we came out of lockdown, we weren't restricted, but I said to John, I said, you know what, I just like this idea. I think it's so cool. So we went out, and it was cheap to make, and we went out and shot it in black and white with a color sequence. The music, by the way, is by Adrian Chivers of Noise in Your Eye, who he worked with Daniel Penning, and an ensemble of other artists, including Nick Mason of Pink Floyd, so he's on the score. So they all chipped in. I mean, I wouldn't be able to afford Nick Mason, yeah, but he liked the film, and they got involved. So we went out, put the film together, made it. We wore several hats. John did the editing as well as being DOP, and shot it beautifully. And when we put it together, I, you know, it is just a magical thing. I've been involved in these big features and big films, but with some great directors like John Musker and Ron Clements, who did Hercules and Aladdin. Fabulous to work for, but they're not my films. I've done small parts in them. So to suddenly have this and be responsible to put this together, to direct it, and of course, I mean, I don't consider myself a fully fledged producer, but in these cases, I had to get involved in that side to actually make it, get it done. So I was doing things, hopefully on the feature, there's things that I've had to do on smaller films that I can delegate to what I call a proper producer. Yeah. um, we got to make that Censure. We put it out there into festivals. It won over 40 awards, at least in counting. It's screened along with our second film, Confines. It's screened in Beverly Hills at the Fine Arts Theatre, which is on the YouTube side. We've got Hannah Fletcher does interviews a lot of the people that saw the film there. It's been at the Producers Club in New York, and the Espace Miramar in Cannes, where we picked up an award for Best Composer. So Adrian Trivers and Roy Genrai and Daniel Penny picked that up. But we went over. We didn't know we were going to win, and we won that. And what was amazing is the person who runs it actually said we should have won Best Director, Best Actor as well. So that was nice. But I was happy with the one award. So it's been an incredible experience, and it just shows if you what you can do. I mean, we didn't have a massive marketing budget. I do a lot of that myself as well. And you start off small. And I remember seeing Sean Baker, I admire hugely, who did Tangerine, based down on Sunset Boulevard with the trans prostitutes down there. In the indie film, that type of script would never have got through Hollywood. It just wouldn't have got made. And he knows that. And he's now done Anora, won all those awards. God bless him. And he said, the restrictions, he said, the big Hollywood films, they have a process because there's so much money involved. You've got to have an A-list or whatever that is, an A-list actor, all these different things in place before they even talk to you. And he's managed to just go out there and do it. Now, and interestingly, he's got Anora wasn't a tiny budget. I think it was 6 million. I think it's something like, was it 18 million they spent on marketing. So it's not so indie anymore, but it still has the freedom and feel of an indie project, because a lot of things would have got watered down in a big studio. That's the problem. So it is a great journey. We went on to do Confines. An actor saw Censure, Luc Desjang, who was an actor in London's Burning and Holby City, some British TV shows. And he did pretty well years ago, but settled down with a family, and acting is not a regular paycheck, so he had another business, which has done very well, but he still had the urge just to make films. So he contacted me and says, look, I'd love to make a film with you. Again, it was a micro budget. There was some money, not a lot. So I said, I've got an idea. There's what's called a blind house up the road here from me in the village. And I said, we could do a monologue with you there, but we could still cut away to cool looking locations and make it feel a lot bigger, because it's all going on in his head. He's going through this mental journey. So he backed that film, and we all chipped in whatever we could. And we put that film together. This time we went for a 20-minute film. Censure ended up being 40 minutes because it felt right, but we aimed this one to be 20 minutes because we'd been told, originally we were told that a 40-minute film was too big to get into festivals, and we did. We got it all over the place. So just if you've got a good product, you can break or bend, not the rules, but certain, certain rules, or like Cannes would take a 40-minute short, so we couldn't put it into that. but we could into Cannes Seventh Art, so that was a different festival. That was fine. Um, so it's been and continue to be a blast. So we're building up to the next one, which will be a feature.
Before we move on, I wanted to quickly go over some of the ways that you can support me. The easiest way is subscribing to my channel and watching my latest videos. I've also started a membership program that gives you early access to videos before they go live. It starts at just $3 a month on YouTube and Patreon, and if memberships aren't your thing, you can buy individual posts directly on Patreon without the membership fee. My feature film Cashing Out is available to watch on major platforms like Amazon and Apple TV, and you can even watch for free on platforms like Tubi, Plex, and YouTube. If you want to support directly, there's a pay what you want option on my own OTT platform that starts at just $2. And if you do watch the film, it would mean the world to me to leave a review on IMDb, Letterboxd, or your favorite platform. Lastly, if you're interested in my future film projects, you can sign up for my email list. I have some exciting new films that I can't wait to share with you all. All of these items will be linked in the description below. Thank you so much for the support. Now let's get back to the show. You have two new short films that have come out recently, Censure and Confines, which congratulations. I watched both of them and they're fantastic. But I'm really curious, especially coming from this Hollywood background, like how did that kind of help you and what techniques did you carry over from working on Hollywood films?
What was interesting is when working on The Iron Giant with Brad Bird, his comment often was that his experience of working on The Simpsons and TV stuff gave him um, an ability to work with smaller budgets. So when Quest for Camelot had come out and it tanked, and it was 140 million, and they literally halved the budget for The Iron Giant, and he was a bit depressed about it. He's still at 80 million. I wish. But he was able to use the skill sets that he'd worked on on TV shows. You have to be faster, quicker, and make choices really quick. So he had to do that, whereas Disney on their next film, Tarzan or whatever, should take a lot longer in development and it's a different thing. So he learned. So I watched and learned. I watched all these guys and learned from them all. And then when I came back to England and worked on TV stuff, in fact, Lost Treasure Hunt, we had to do on a fraction of the budget as a TV pilot, and we used something called Flash, a software where you can have a library of mouse. I mean, this is animation, not live action. But again, it gave me an appreciation of what you can do with budgets. So just because something is cheaper, it doesn't have to look cheap. You can make something look really classy by making good choices early on. And when you're storyboarding something, you make a lot of your choices then and there and move quite quickly. Now, I didn't extensively storyboard Censure or Confines. I did thumbnails and a shot list where I could work with John. If, say, we did the Chimera in the future, that has heavy visual effects like Walking Dead, CGI, all sorts of stuff that's more complicated to set up the shots. You have to go for a more complex procedure, so it's going to cost more money. But purposely with Censure and Confines, thought of ideas that were economical. So the first one, Censure, was shot all in the village, all the locations, the chapel up the road, which was a fantastic location because you see, without giving it away, the final sequence, the reveal, where there's a shot above from the balcony, wouldn't work in a regular house. It had to be set up that way. So when I went to see, AD actually owns that Airbnb, and I looked at the place, thought, this is just a gift to film the bathroom. It's an exceptionally long bathroom with a Buddha at the end. I could see that scene. It felt Stanley Kubrick. I don't know why. And we hang on that shot because all it is a voice off screen berating by Vivian Taylor, by the way, who's in both our films and will be in Bambola. And she's berating away. She recorded that up in Scotland, so she's not there. The ears bang, 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 and she's berating him. And all it is on one shot. And the DOP says, "Oh, is he going to turn?" I said, "No, I don't want him to turn. He's trying to switch off. He's just trying to shut these voices out of his head. I just want it locked in, just a slow creep in." And then AD did this almost like not a horror movie kind of sound effect in the background, which works superbly. So you make economical choices all the way through. There was one location up in the woods, which was a bunker, like a war bunker. they call them pillboxes, and they're scattered all over the UK. So this was a place I wanted him to go and have a beer and a cigarette and switch off from his surroundings. It's a moment of relief before the onslaught of the voices again. So he goes up there. So that was just so we didn't have to have big company moves. You know, when I lived in LA, you'd see these trucks after trucks with cables. Oh my God. It was like moving a village we had a handful of people and a rucksack and some equipment and excuse me, we would pick everything up and just move. So we shot at a train tunnel down the road with a beautiful black and white shot of the silhouette down there. We shot at the chapel. We shot at the local post office. It's a interesting building with a huge big window, and we could shoot from outside. You can make all sorts of things. People in the village can't believe how cinematic we made the village. It's all here. There's a great pan down from the hills, a beautiful location. That they shoot War Horse, they've shot Harry Potter, all in the villages, all around here. Castle Coombe, Poldark up the road. So I can just pop out my back door and film with my DOP. So we pan down, a beautiful pan down from the landscape down to the chapel. But basically it was all shot locally. Then Confines, the idea was, it was just this one monologue. We did go to some great other locations because Neil did put in the script, Neil Bassel, he said he appears at the edge of a cliff. I'm thinking, oh God, when we're going to find a cliff and how are we going to do that? Then I realized we have the Cheddar Gorge, which is less than an hour away. It's a stunning location. You'll see it in the film where he goes towards the edge of the cliff and raises his arms. And the shot from the front, we just found an outcrop near there. And of course, he's not at the top of the, just, it looks like he's at the top of the cliff, but he's not. And then when we shot from the other angle, we just shot it in the way that he didn't get too close to the edge. Maybe on a bigger film, they would have harnesses and touch it out and go closer. So I was quite adamant with the actor because he kept edging closer. I said, stop, stop. He said, but it's a better shot. I said, okay, that's good enough. We got it. And John's there behind shooting down. And I'm well back. Directing from a distance. So God bless them. They got amazing shots there. So I'm trying to remember what the question was. Economics, wasn't it? Or how to make a film on a budget. So it's just it's just you ask favors, you pull favors that you can't do every time. Tom Conti did the voice as a favor because I knew him. So in the meantime, he was off shooting Oppenheimer, probably getting paid vast sums of money for playing Einstein. But God bless him, he did that for me, and so did everyone else. He pull favors. You can only do it so many times. So hopefully on Bambola, we've got potentially 2 investors, 2 producers. One of them, I can't say who it is. He's big time, and he's a good friend, and I speak to him every few months. I can't say yet who it is, but you'd be surprised. But he wants to give back now. He's done these big multi-million-dollar films and been hugely successful. Wants to give back now. So we'll see what happens. So I'm fingers crossed. There'll hopefully some news in the next few months.
You made a point there right at the end that I kind of want to touch on as far as asking for favors, because no matter what budget level, how you're making the film, whatever, you're inevitably going to have to ask for some kind of favor from somebody. When I'm asking for a favor, however, I'm it's typically like friends of family, right? Like it's nobody that's going to be in the industry necessarily. But when you are asking for a favor, you're probably asking a lot of your colleagues that you've worked with over the last few decades or so. So what's your opinion as far as being reasonable with asking for favors and just the art of the ask altogether?
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing, if you make sure you create a quality product, a great little film, an idea. Like I sent the script by Neil Basson to Tom Conti, and he looked and said, "This is a nice script." So if you create something quality, people will want to. And if you explain the situation, this is all we've got. there's, um, people will often happily jump in and get involved. Right, say from Tom Conti to people down the villages, down the village, down the one of the streets up to the chapel. You see people looking behind. There's a butcher that looks out the window. There's a woman that looks out. I knocked on doors and asked, "Would you like to be in it?" You don't always get a yes, but you'd be surprised how often people do. Um, and you keep them in the loop. Um, Invite them to the premiere. um, Anything to so just by hook or by crook, you can get things done. So it's all about how you approach people and ask them, and if you've got a quality product, you'd be surprised how many people will get involved.
One question that I like to ask filmmakers is what positions do they typically are like non-negotiables for on set? So I talked to a filmmaker recently and he had this triangle, right? So you have the director, a camera operator, and a cinematographer. And he feels like if you have those three positions, that you're able to finish the film. You should be able to finish the film without any problems, right? I would probably take out the camera operator in there and add in, like a sound recordist, but, given your experience and all that, I'm really curious on your take here.
Well, I suppose it's I've created these films because I wanted to direct some live action films. So I'm the director. And what's interesting is I had some bigger films. One was called Icy Spiders. It was based on my dad who had Parkinson's. And I started writing some ideas down about his hallucinations. It was a cathartic way and a story I wanted to tell. But it would still need £1 million or more to make, even as a small feature. And I did get some producers, some Hollywood newbies, I would say. And it's a long, long story, and I've got to be careful. There's no lawsuit or anything like that. But luckily, I've got the project back. But it was going in a direction where, because they were newbie producers, they were like, "Oh, we need a big name director, a big name." They didn't want even Tom Conti. They wanted somebody else because he wasn't big enough for them. But even though he's a brilliant actor, for God's sake. So I was starting to sense that I was losing control, and they also wanted uh, a director who could bring in some money. So he wasn't a particularly good director, I thought, but he was related. I've got to be careful. He was related to somebody famous who would have put a little bit of money in. But he didn't have the passion for the project that I had, because it is based on real life experience, my experience, not his. So I could have told it properly, and I will tell it properly. I almost lost that project, and it would have gone off and been ruined. And luckily, I've got it back, and I can start all over again and go back to the original script and tweak it a bit and start again. But for me, for me, the non-negotiable was I was to direct that film, and I'm going to use a British word. The buggers were going to take it off me, and I won't use any more swear words. That's the one bleep. Um, so Hollywood, you can get burned. You got to be so careful. So the beauty with the little films is you've got control over it. So I can say to John, "Okay, I'll direct it. You can be the DP." I asked him as a favor because we had an editor. It cost a lot more money, so he agreed to edit it and did a fabulous job. AD did the music. Um, I was very happy about that. So we had our core team, if you like, of course. So as you say, the rest, um, you know, uh, is interchangeable. You have different. I've happened to have Vivian on. It'll be all three films, but that's just happens. Obviously, the second film I had a different leading actor. It depends on casting too. Um, all the other things, and I've got some interesting editors that have seen my films now that may want to get involved. So it's all negotiables, but yeah, the key is if there may be some projects in the future that I'd be happy to sort of exec produce and step back. Maybe an animated project because I'm focused on the live action stuff, but I could oversee something. Um, so yeah, no. So the reason for this is that I can direct and make some films that I feel happy about. I know the directors and they can direct their own films, and I'll direct mine. It's fine with the friends. There's no conflict. Um, so 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 uh, And if I can, John would be John Fry would be my first choice on now my bigger projects, and I think we now have leverage because he wouldn't have done some of the bigger features. Now we're doing this, I get a smaller feature. It gives him leverage to get, and I would want to, because we have a great working relationship, to say, look, this is what he's done for me. I want him to do this on a bigger film now. It's all baby steps.
One thing I like to press on this channel is just the importance of marketing. Like, marketing is almost as important as making the film itself. And that's actually something that you touched on before we even started recording. So, you mentioned to me how you were able to secure a lot of press for these two films. So I'm curious, what were your techniques for, getting that press?
Well, I think what has helped is that I actually, as mentioned earlier, although I did a degree in graphic design, I did the publicity option. So I've always been very publicity aware. And this was the days way before social media or the internet. Yeah. Um, but it's given me, and I bet I've always considered myself an ideas man. Um, so I like to have lots of ideas, and then you can work with other people to get there. But and I have a basic working sort of skills in Photoshop and things like that. Um, but for all of our films so far, I've gone ahead and quite happily done a lot of the PR and press. In fact, I just did a press release, which was just released to Original Magazine, and they put the press release for Vivian being in Cannes, and I'm hoping next year or the year after we can go and she can go dressed in character, you know, and Dave Lynch, who's a massive fan of his films, when he put a film in for the Oscars, he didn't have a budget, so he sat on Sunset Boulevard with a cow. I don't know what the relevance of the cow was. Maybe it probably never was, but it got attention. So sometimes you've got to do what you got to do. So I'll write press releases and get help from people that can finesse them and put them out there. And if you go on the internet, you'll see we've got a ton of press out there. In fact, for Censure and Confines, we combined them as a double bill. And I did a radio interview for BBC Wiltshire. And off the back of that interview, a cinema, the Parade Cinema in Marlborough, heard it and said, "Oh, can you bring your films and show them at our cinema?" It's a beautiful building that's being restored, fantastic place in a beautiful town. And so we went along, and I contacted the BBC and said, "Look, this is my background. We've got these two short films, double bill, playing at the parade. Would you come along?" And they agreed to come along. And again, it's with Alice Bouverie, the reporter, and it was on BBC Points West. And she came along. And years ago, I didn't like public speaking, I was kind of shy. But living in Hollywood, you have to work yourself out of it a bit, and you get more relaxed about it. So um, when we went to the BBC came along with the team and everything, I thought they were going to do like a little interview outside, pre-recorded, so that if there are any sound issues, they've got a backup. That's the normal thing. And I said, "Are we going to do the interview out here in the courtyard?" I said, "No, we'll just go live. It's more exciting." I thought, oh my God. It was there in front of the audience, um, live TV. And when the light comes on and they say, hold, the whole audience had to go silent for a minute, 2 minutes. And for a minute, she was going, "Oh, I can't hear him." Oh, I thought we weren't going to get through, and the interview would be off. And she said, "Okay, I've got it." And the light came on. "Okay, we're live, and you'll see it on my YouTube channel." And I'm quite proud to have done that. Yeah.
What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that any filmmakers make when trying to build an audience?
Biggest mistakes? Well, trying to pander to, it's actually the mistakes that the bigger studios make, pandering to what they think will sell. If you're an indie filmmaker, bloody do what you want to do. Tell your story. Tell it. This is your chance. Because the bigger the budgets, the harder it gets, and the more the voices come in, and the interference and the arguments. If you've got a little film with just your pals, and even if it's on your iPhone, like is it Steven Soderbergh shot a couple great films just on an iPhone. Um, just do it, enjoy it. So there's no need to make mistakes because you're in control. And it's probably the only time you will be. You see these big directors, it's only after several big films that suddenly that they call the shots. But they've had to really go through the mill. And even then, like Alex Proyas did some big films, I, Robot. He's happily making his own little short films in Australia now because I'm slagging off Hollywood here. There's a lot of good things about Hollywood before I get written off there. Uh, but they're making his own short films. And what's interesting is their best films are often the ones when they're early in their career before the big money comes in. Like Guillermo del Toro, The Pan's Labyrinth, and his small films are fantastic. And then when you got a bigger budget with Pacific Rim, I wasn't so keen because it wasn't him. But he's managed to get back and do some good stuff again. But so it's yeah. So just enjoy. I'm trying to think of any mistakes that they would make. I mean, you're going to make mistakes as part of learning. Just learn from your mistakes, and get better.
What is your take on film festivals and distribution? Because there's obviously a big issue, especially at the smaller budget level, as far as both of those go, where you're working with a lot of scammy people or predatory companies. So what's your take on film festivals and distribution as a whole?
Yeah, well, see, years ago, I did do a short film before I moved back from the States called The Journal of Edmund Karp, which was an animated short with Hugh Laurie. Um, and this was the days before Film Freeway and all the online stuff. And I had to make up. I moved back to England, and I actually did get it two sponsors, Macromedia and Wacom, to pay the fee to transfer it digitally onto film so we could show it at Lanley's Theatre with a group of shorts to help qualify it for the Oscars. And I think it was, I'm trying to remember, it was thousands. Could have been 8,000. They split the fee. We did that. But when I came back to England, there wasn't a big marketing budget. It was me to get the film out there. So I would have to make up these pneumatic tapes about this big, post them. The tapes cost a lot, and all the beta tapes, they cost a fortune. The packaging cost a fortune. So by the time I sent it off to a few festivals, and with festivals, it's a numbers game. You've got to put it into a lot of festivals to get it into a small percent. And the thing is, you don't know which ones those are going to be. So you have to do, so it costs money. So I kind of I gave up on that one because it was just costing me too much. So I didn't really get it into any festivals. So when it came around to censure, suddenly you've got Film Freeway, you upload it once, a click of the button, you can enter it into all these festivals. Then I've learned from which ones the first time around what to enter into the second time around. The ones that seem friendly to us, because it seems that the films that did well, that Censure did well and got into the festivals, when I went back to them with Confines, would do well again. And the ones where Censure was rejected, Confines would get rejected. So it's quite interesting to see. I don't know what the reasoning is, what the judges, who knows. And also, I won't get heavily into it. There are festivals that are more sympathetic to a diverse audience, which is fair enough, but unfortunately excludes my demographic. But it can be an obstacle nowadays, which it never used to be. So I target more specifically now, and I'm hugely grateful. Luckily, I had a bit of money that I made that I could put into Censure, and we actually entered it into twice as many festivals because we had a smaller budget for festivals for Confines, ironically, where we had more budget to make the film. But what's interesting is that proportionately, Censure got in double the amount of festivals because we entered it into double the amount of festivals. So it got in more than Confines because we entered more. So if we then do Confines into more, I'm sure it would level up. Because I'm proud as hell of both films and the team, So it was a learning, same with distribution, which we can talk about in a minute. It's been a learning experience for me because, we don't have a massive festival team. I did talk to a film festival doctor about Censure, and it was 40 minutes, which is unusual length for a short. And she said, "Would you cut it down to 20?" When I looked at it, I thought, And what's interesting is that the script originally was 20 pages, and normally they say a page per minute. But because I had this dance sequence and music and all this other stuff, it literally doubled the amount of time. So it was a 20-page script that ended up being 40 minutes. I did cut it off at 40 minutes because then you can't enter it. You're in this sort of mid range. You can't enter it into a short or features. So, but I looked at the film and thought, you know what? I'll do my next film specifically for 20 minutes, but this is what it feels right. So I didn't go with the film doctor, and we got into all these festivals. I stuck to my guns. Um, so that was that.
What's been your distribution strategy? Like, are you looking to go more the traditional route, or have you been looking at more self-distribution options like Film Hub or Quiver or some, using an aggregator as opposed to traditional distribution?
The beauty is nowadays is that, yeah, you've got the online option. When I did Ebon Cut, it wasn't really an option. So, um, say it's been a learning experience. We they've done 2 years the festival run, so now you want to get the film out there and get people to see it. Now, I didn't know much about distributors, so basically I went through I've got thousands of people on my LinkedIn, looked through all the distributors and emailed, but I knew in most cases you get the answer, "Sorry, we're only interested in features." That's the blanket response. But I found two distributors that were interested, Render Yard and Life Size Entertainment. So this is only recently, so we've signed with both, and Render Yard have got it onto Foursome TV. Both films are up there now on Foursome, and they will be approaching Amazon, all the rest, Mubi, and all the others. And we'll see. So I'm waiting to see what happens. I'd started looking at Film Hub, um, and I know that we didn't have the right specs at that time, but I could look at that again. But I know that they go off to the same places. So now I've got distributors on board. I can just leave it to them. They take a percentage, whatever that is. It's not too bad. And to be honest, with the short films, I never expected to make vast amounts of money from the shorts, as they were created as calling cards for what we can do. And then when we go to Bambola, or Little Red is another one that's coming up, we can get a bigger budget, and go with it that way. And then, well, as preachers, we should be able to say, you know, we can make some money out of this. Um, so the shorts they're doing the function that they were made for, really.
I know a few animators personally. So, speaking to that group specifically, what is your advice as far as, somebody who comes from that background is looking to transition into more traditional filmmaking?
Well, yeah, it is quite different because speed and costs. If you want to make an animated film, it's quite often takes years. I've got a friend who's taking well over 10 years. Beautiful, probably longer, beautiful piece of animation. A guy called Michel Gagne. Look him up. He's a brilliant animator and a brilliant director. That's called Rex. That is so well done. But he spent years and years and years. The beauty of live action is our films, we filmed them literally in days. Sent him probably about 4 days. But obviously the preparation takes a month, couple of months, and the post a couple of months. Same with Confines. But the speed at which you can make the film, and if you're on a shoot with an actor and it's not quite right, you can say, "Oh, let's do it again," or "Let's do it again." Whereas in animation, if you say to an animator, "Can you rough that scene out again?" It can take another 3 days or a week just to come back with a rough animation because you don't clean it up and do all that stuff. That's another process until the performance is approved. So there is a difference. I enjoy the speed, um, and in animation, there's ways of doing things economically. Like I said with Lost Treasure Hunt, we did, instead of full classical Disney animation, we did that in Flash, which was a software which you can use libraries of shapes for mouths. But if you do it in an aesthetic and a well chosen way with great art direction, we actually did that. I took it to Ghostbot in San Francisco, and they had great taste, I thought, in their commercials that they did. and we knew that they would give it a stylish look. So you can make economic choices, but you'd have to make that at the beginning. Is this the style that I want to make? If you go for the full Disney look, then it's going to take time and money, which is why there's not a lot of people doing it.
You said something here at the beginning that I wanted to follow up here towards the end, and it's the age-old phrase. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon when it comes to indie filmmaking, right? And you're somebody who's had a very very long career. So, what is your advice as far as sustaining a career of this caliber?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. There's no such thing as overnight. You see pop bands that suddenly they're huge and everywhere, but there's normally a long journey before they get to that point. And I'll quote David Lynch because I love it, because somebody asked him about his career, and he said, "What career? There's no career. There's just the doing." And what I loved about him is that he did it whether he had a Hollywood film or his own thing, or he was doing his own paintings or his own thing. Um, you know, it was just about the doing. And and what I found in life was, when I did animation back in the day, I don't animate now, by the way, but when I did, I was loving it. It was my passion, and the money came. The money came as we were paid huge amounts of money. When Disney set up, and then Warner Brothers set up Future Animation, and DreamWorks, or Katzenberg called me a couple of times, telling me, asked me to go over and visit the studios. They were all after us, which was great, but that's gone. So then I had to deal with the fact that what I loved as a passion couldn't even make a proper living. Whereas before I was I had this huge house in the hills. Um, it's worth over 2 million now, 2.5 million. You know, um, but as soon as you focus on what you want to do, so I'm focused. That's the hope. But I'm focused on making my own short films. I've got no expectations of money, but I'm hoping it will lead to bigger films. If they make money, great. But I would just concentrate on the doing, as David Lynch said. I think it's a great philosophy.
We covered a lot of ground here in this interview, so I'm curious if there's anything that you want to leave off on that I maybe may have missed in any of my questions.
That's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of anything. I think one of the things I would say is I used to be very hard on myself when I was younger. Things were never good enough. I wasn't good enough, and I wanted to get better. And it drives you to get better. But I think the thing is not to beat yourself up. As long as you're doing your best and trying, I think that is the key. Just don't beat yourself up about it. Nothing is perfect. Just keep on doing it for the love of it, and enjoy the process. And also have a balanced life. I'm lucky enough to have a wife and two lovely kids who've grown up, and during lockdown, for the first time ever, I got into gardening. I was out there, and I love it there. And I think to have that balance, if I've got a film that I'm worried about and I'm getting stressed out, I'll go out and potter in the garden for a half an hour, and it goes away. So I think that's more of a life lesson as you get older, in my time of life, to get the work-life balance right.
Okay, so now I got to ask you a follow up here because and I talked to somebody recently. I asked them the same question as far as work life balance. I am somebody who I would consider to be a bit of a workaholic, and I've always been that way. Like especially with my filmmaking career, like I grinded through my 20s, right? And that led to me having some health issues. Like I had a heart attack at 33. So at that point, I decided to kind of try to take a step back, look at my life, and just just figure out how to create more of a balance. So I'm taking care of myself while also being able to do the creative projects and everything that I want to do. And as somebody who's about to start a family too, I mean, I'm really curious to get your take. I'm starting a family, not you, obviously, but what are your thoughts on trying to figure out just the balance so that way you're able to accomplish your creative visions and just being able to do projects, but not running yourself too thin.
You can. It's not either or. It's not either a career or family. You can do both. Um, and I think I've looked into certain things. I love the David Lynch videos where he talks about meditation and transcendental meditation. I've sort of looked into it. I can get a handle on it because every time I try it, I fall asleep. So, so it's I still can't figure that one out. But I think my way of meditating is probably the garden. I'll go out. I rebuilt a wall. It's 100 feet down outside of the studio here, and I'll go down and I'll position it and do things. And I think that is my form of meditation. Um, so I think, yeah, to find those other areas of relief from the pressures of the artistic, because we, as artists, we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do great things. We want to do great things. Um, and I think, I guess David Lynch found that balance, and who knows whether we do, but we can always look and research and be open to it all, I think.
So I like to end my interviews all the same, and that's usually asking the question, if you could have worked on any major project and been a fly on the wall, which would it be? But in your position, you've actually been on a lot of these sets, right? Um, I told my wife that I was interviewing you, and she was super excited.
Say hi to her from all.
Uh,
Yeah,
I
say
I
hi.
definitely will. But you've worked on a lot of her favorite films, but funny enough, you've actually worked on her all-time favorite Harry Potter film, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. So I'm curious, what's your favorite memory from working on that film?
Oh, that's actually funny that you should select that one because that is one of the few films that I actually didn't enjoy working on. I did animate on the Hippogriff, but I was kind of freelance the last 3 months of the film. So they had their tight team at Frame Store of youngsters. So here is I, a grey hair older man, sitting on these rows and rows of these computer whizzes, and I felt totally out of place. I don't know if I could think of any anecdotes. So I only did a handful of scenes of the Hippogriff walking back and forward and flying a bit, just a handful. And whereas at Disney, I was a highly respected lead animator that people looked up to. There, I have to say, unfortunately, I was just a cog in a machine, and you got all these effects. So I don't want to
Okay,
burst
so let's
you.
go ahead and flip the question then, because she loves a lot of your Disney films and the Iron Giant that you've worked on as well. So what was your favorite memory, just I guess on any of your projects in the early years?
Well, the most incredible film for me to work on was The Iron Giant. Um, it, uh, it's funny because I'd actually pitched a version of that to Don Bluth, The Iron Man by Ted Hughes, the book. And I pitched it to Don Bluth in Ireland at his studio when I was working there. And I did a 10-point outline. I had a design of the robot and the boy. And I pitched it to him, and he said, "Oh, this," because it was a thin book, so it needed a lot of elaborating on. But I saw the potential. He said, "This is only a featurette. It's not a feature." So I just put it back on the shelf and forgot about it. And then when I was at Disney on Hercules, a friend called and said, "They're working on the Iron Man or the Iron Giant over at Warner Brothers." I said, "Really?" And a friend of mine called to come over and meet Tone Fratelli. He was the main animator on it. Come over and meet Brad Bird. And I went over and met Brad, and he talked me into leaving Disney. He said, "If you want to carry on doing musicals, the same old thing, I'm going to do something different here," which he did. And I actually left Disney to go into that film. The huge pay packet helped, and a signing bonus back when they did them. Um, and I went over and worked on that film and learnt a lot from Brad. Um, and he was a unique and is a unique director, very, very outspoken. I wonder whether I should say I think he's on the spectrum somewhere, where he doesn't edit what he speaks. So he'll say things in meetings that nobody else would say, good or bad. Quite often good because it's the truth, which execs they like to hear. Um, and he would say all kinds of things. I'm trying to remember what it was that he said, but I remember one of the big execs, as he was talking, it was being videoed on camera, just went, like, he was saying too much. But we all, as artists, we all loved him for it because it was all the things that we would wish we could say, but weren't powerful enough to say. So that's a sort of general anecdote. And, love him or loathe him, he's a brilliant director. I appreciate my times. He went on to Pixar and did big things there. And interestingly, I feel he did live action. He was one of the writers on Batteries Not Included. And I actually will tell you an anecdote where he was at the time he was a young punk at Disney, and he was actually fired. There's a little video that they did where he does all these drawings about the process, but he was vocal there, and they were cutting corners, and he told them, and they didn't like it, and he was fired from Disney. And later on, he carried on being vocal, and he was given the opportunity to direct Family Dog, part of the Amazing Stories series. Really nice little short, really well done. Brad Bird all over it. But later, Spielberg, they were at a meeting with all these execs around a table, and they said, "Well, we'd want to do a series of it." And he said, "No, no, Stephen, this will never work as a series because series are talking heads, and this is pantomime. It wouldn't work." And I think Spielberg took exception. Gosh, this is old video. I'm saying it anyway. This is behind the scenes stuff, and Spielberg took exception to it, and it hurt his career for quite a while, I think. But what is quite lovely about it is that years later, Brad Bird saw The Iron Giant, and I think let him know that it was a great film. And to top that, they even used the giant in his film Ready Player One in one of the sequences. They had the giant from there, so it went full circle. So in the end, there was I think Brad would have been pleased that he kind of patched that with Spielberg. So that's a little behind the scenes anecdote. I've probably got a lot more, but I probably can't say on camera.
Richard, thank you so much for coming on here today. I mean, this was definitely awesome, but just a very validating experience for me specifically, just being the small filmmaker that I am, and just being able to talk to somebody, like you, who's just worked on so many incredible films over the years. So I really appreciate you coming on. Where can people learn more about all of your projects?
From a YouTube channel, just Google Richard Bazley or Bazley Films, Bazley. Is it looks like Bazley, but it's Bazley. Yeah, just Google, reach out. Obviously, I can't reply to everyone, but where I can, I do. And if it's somebody you recommend, if it's through recommendation, I'm happy to talk to people.
I want to give Richard another huge shout out for coming on the channel. I mean, like I said there at the end, it's just crazy where this channel has led me. I never thought I'd be talking to people like him, people in the industry. It's cool. Like, I still want to keep this channel focused as far as like the types of filmmakers that I'm talking to. Like, would I talk to a Hollywood director? Like, yeah, maybe at some point, but it always needs to lead back into, the overall goal of this channel and helping out filmmakers like you. So, they got to have small roots. And the fact that, he didn't start out in small roots, now he's kind of, reversed a little bit, coming from the big industry and starting to do things on his own. Very, very, very interesting overall, especially just hearing about it, all of his experiences. So, another huge shout out to Richard. Again, all of his stuff will be linked in the description. You just should definitely go check out his work. And of course, if you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel and like this video, so that way you can see more awesome interviews just like this one. And if you want to help support me directly, my feature film, Cashing Out, will be linked in the description below if you want to check it out. And of course, I will have a couple of the videos linked on screen here if you want to check out some more awesome interviews that I've done in the past. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.